So, welcome to Deepening Your Spiritual Life with the Ananda Monastery. I'm Brahmachari Jamal, and with me is Brahmachari Premdas. And this month, we're focusing on attitudes, on right attitudes. And so, this evening, we're going to talk about the importance of right attitudes. And next week, we'll give specific attitudes and talk about those. But this evening we'll just focus on the importance of it. And it's really critical to have a right attitude on the spiritual path. In fact, Master one time said that the spiritual path is like running a race where you have to do stunts along the way, where God is going to test you in this way and that way to make sure that we absolutely have no more likes and dislikes, that we are only here to serve God and to do whatever God wishes. And in fact, the spiritual life is that easy for us to just realize that it's God alone who's doing everything. And that means what comes of itself, let it come. That if we just have a cheerful attitude, then and give it all to God, absolutely all of it. It doesn't mean to be lazy or passive, that we still have to work very hard in this world to make this a better world and to bring light into this world. That's not passive whatsoever. But that has to be done with an attitude of surrender to God's will. I spoke with Nayaswami Asha last evening, and she put a visualization in my mind where I was imagining that I was with Master and Master was speaking, and a thought came in my head. Imagine, I want this to be for you, not for me, but so imagine that you're with Master and he's there and he's speaking to you, and a thought comes in where you feel that Master's uncaring or that he really doesn't care about you, that he's being unnecessarily harsh to you, or that he's not supportive. In that moment, you can automatically know that that thought is coming from Satan, that that thought is from the dark side, because Master wants nothing more for you than what is for your own good, your own liberation. And Master has a very caring, kind, supportive, nurturing attitude. And so, as Asha was putting this in my mind last night, it was very clear because sometimes we get thoughts in our minds and we're not sure, is this right? And maybe the world's really wrong, or maybe that guy's really wrong, and it's the right thing for me to be angry, let's say, or something like that. And we're just not clear in our minds what's clear. But you can visualize that if you were right there with Master and he told you something that you weren't quite sure, that if there was a negative attitude that came into you, that you should cast that out of your mind right away, because Master wants only to give us perfect love. Now, it was so beautiful how Asha teaches, because I could then extrapolate from that to, does God want me to do this on the spiritual path? And we go into, how does it feel? Do I start to feel contractive and squeezed and uncomfortable and not nice and negative? Well, then that's probably not coming from God. But when I have an attitude, and do particular decisions give me a feeling of expansiveness, joy, lightness, peace, calmness, all of the 8 aspects of God. And so we have to learn to really watch our minds, and to watch our feelings. That attitudes really is another way of watching our feelings. And in the beginning of the spiritual path, it doesn't seem even possible that we could have beautiful, calm, uplifted, joyful feelings all of the time. That most of us are used to having an undisciplined heart that is just fluctuating with the waves of circumstance, with my neighbor's angry at me, so now I'm going to be angry at him. And our heart is just on this up and down seesaw. It also is, before we come on the spiritual path, deeply tied into desires. When our desires are fulfilled, God loves me. I got a XYZ today, whatever your desire is that's fulfilled. And when you didn't get your desire fulfilled, oh, God, why are the stars up there? They're not in my favor. Maybe I need to go consult an astrologer. And we're just floating on these waves of circumstance. But as we practice Kriya Yoga, as we go deeper into the spiritual path, we realize that it's all just a show, and that it's not as big of a deal as we think that it is, and that we can just stay absolutely centered. I had a nice talk with Asuji last night. Another wonderful perspective that she gave me was, and this came actually, there was a man, God only knows how he got into this situation, but I think he was a journalist reporting on something. That government got angry at him and put him in a jail for 5 years and didn't treat him nicely, obviously, in jail. So every day mentally, he would write his own autobiography of a yogi from the perspective that he was free, that he had got out of this prison, and he wrote it from the perspective of joy, like from the future, looking back into the past, once it had all worked itself out. And that's how he mentally kept himself sane. And every day, so he would mentally write this autobiography from that perspective, saying, today was a hard day, but I learned this lesson and it's okay. And in the end, it all turned out and it was for good. And I learned all of these great, wonderful lessons. So that's a beautiful way to approach life when we're in something that's really difficult. Because once we go far enough, let's say once we look far enough back into the past, we see, yeah, God's in charge of this whole thing. God's giving every little circumstance so that I can grow for my own growth. Master would often say that if you want to become a stronger wrestler, I don't think any of us probably watching Kushti are into wrestling, or at least anymore, but maybe at some point we were. But he meant this metaphorically, that then you would want to wrestle with a stronger wrestler. If you wrestle with a weak wrestler, you'll never get stronger. And it's the same with life, that when life brings us these tests, that we just simply see them as coming from God so that we can find an even deeper place of centeredness within ourselves that absolutely nothing can touch. The less desires we have, the more we can just live in that space. But when we have desires and it must be like this or like that, then we can't live in that space. So strive to not have many desires. Strive to give everything back to God. There was a man named Gene Hopt who lived in Master's ashram, and I've heard Swamiji say that he did over 1 million kriyas. Swamiji also said that there was a time when Gene Hopt just decided to lock his door for 48 hours, and I don't think he ate or he didn't do anything. He just sat down and he meditated for 48 hours, just using just supreme willpower to just sit there, not move, and just meditate for 48 hours. Wow, that's a big thing to just say, I'm going to meditate for 48 hours. And yet this man left the path, and Master said it was because he didn't have the right attitude, that he thought that he was going to get there by technique alone, and that technique alone will never get us to God realization. You could do your kriyas very poorly. There's a story, we've told it before, but it's so beautiful, and then I'll hand it over to Prem Das, that there was a man also in Master's ashram, and Horace Gray was his name, and he was spastic, and so he would shake like this. And at the end of his life, whatever disease he had that made him shake like that so much, he couldn't even stand anymore. So he would just lie down on the grass, and he would cut weeds with scissors, or he would just pull them out, and then he'd kind of like crawl over to some other place where there was weeds. And that was his seva. And that was about as much as he could do to serve the Master. And so someone came to the ashram, and they were thinking, Master has all of these powers. Why doesn't he just heal Horace? And Master could read the man's mind. And he said, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful that Horace is working out all of his past bad karma that caused him to have this disease this lifetime, and that he'll be free of it. And then on another occasion, Master said about Horace that he's worked out all of his karma, that he's going to achieve liberation this lifetime, that he'll be free in this lifetime. So here we have the man who could sit there with this crazy willpower and meditate for 48 hours. And then here we have the other guy who probably couldn't even do one Kriya right, but just loved Master, couldn't even stand up anymore, could just lie down in the grass and just barely pull weeds. And that's the man who gets liberation. Just look how important right attitudes are. I'll hand it over to you, Premdas.
Okay, thank you, Jamalji. That was beautiful. So, hello everyone. Good evening again from Chandigarh here, and it's a joy to be with all of you. And like Jamalji was telling about why it's important to develop the right attitude. So today, when I was preparing, I had some time to prepare. So in minutes, not in hours. So I was looking at what does attitude mean. It says in dictionary, it says that it's a feeling about something. It's a feeling about something. In life, we all develop attitudes. Like I'm just thinking, speaking of before spiritual path, we all develop these attitudes and feeling about how we perceive things and how we respond to situations. So with experience, what happens is we start growing even over years in during our college or any life during our work time. We start upgrading or to say improving our own attitudes so that we get less pain and more happiness. That's how we perceive it always. Like how what can I do so that I don't get hurt or I can be happy? Is that how we start looking at it? Then as we come on to the spiritual path, right attitude is very much needed, essential, like Jamalji was telling, to evolve ourselves, to evolve in the spiritual path. Swamiji, I would like to quote some few sentences. Swamiji, in an article titled Spiritual Tests and Right Attitudes, says that one of the most important things on the spiritual path is attitude. First of all, that which we put out. Secondly, it's the fruit of whatever good meditations we have. He's saying, first of all, that which we put out, each and every day we put out, and secondly, it's the fruit of whatever good meditations we have. If we feel deep in our meditations and aren't able to translate that peace into our daily life, in other words, if the practice of meditation doesn't really make us more forgiving, doesn't really make us more understanding, if it's something purely private and internal, then we haven't really achieved the reality we are seeking. Wow. So, so now I'm going to share about some how on developing this right attitudes. So here's a in the same article, Swamiji has shared an incident from his life. So I'm going to share with you all this thing. This was in the pre-early days, even I think before the when Swamiji was touring all the places to uh, to make or what is a better word to build Ananda to get all the money to so that he can build this Ananda. Back then, I think only Jyotishji was helping him. Other than Jyotishji, there was this one person who was also a friend of his, and she was helping him. She was the secretary. She was working for him. So as a secretary, she used to mail books, she used to answer his letters, and she used to book halls and get his places ready and all these things. So what happens one day, she just thinks the work is getting too much for her. She just decides and she writes a letter to Swamiji telling notice period. In 1 month's time, I'm going to quit this job. And yeah, that's her signature. Swamiji sees it. And to his shock, the next day, she gets a different nice job and she quits it. She quits Swamiji like, she says, I'm not going to come back to work with you. During that time, Swamiji was putting out so much energy, so he did not know now how to perceive it. Like I'm at one point of view, like in one perspective, he's just putting out so much energy to make this happen. All that he has, touring places, going to this city, that city, and one more place, this happens. He doesn't know how to take it. So in the sense, Yeah, he's like, what he just can't. So now we all know all the right attitudes. Even Swamiji says, like, there are so many right attitudes. I wanted to tell, okay, this is like a dream, this is God's dream, this should not happen. No, I have to, maybe God is making me to work hard. But somehow all those reasonings could not, like, there were some feelings hurt because she was also his friend and he just could not understand what was happening. So he tried to use his rational mind, but nothing is working here. So what does he do? Then he thinks, why not let me meditate first? And he just sits down to meditate. He meditates. And then at the end of meditation, he asks God to come to him. God, why don't you come to me? Then afterwards, he just starts this conversation with God. This is the during that inner communion which we all practice when the intuition comes and everything. And he asks to God, this problem has happened. How do you want me to respond to it? Please enlighten me. This is what he says to Divine Mother. And suddenly, like during that time, he gets this wave of peace filling his heart. And he just, like, the only thing that comes to him, it's not like he gets this exalted state that Divine Mother tells, this is all happened for your good, or this happened because you had to work 2 times hard, you're burning up so much karma. No, those things did not come to him. What came to him by that was consideration. He says, Swamiji says, he somehow at that point of time, somehow he felt this joy and peace and consideration where he forgot about himself and he thought about her. He was thinking, like, if she's a good friend and if she's doing this and he's like an instrument for this, and why, what's wrong, and how is she doing? And he just goes and visits her, and she at that point of time was ill in her bed. So he just gets to meet her, and he's all good. And Swamiji says he was good not because of this right attitudes or because of just intellectually thinking I have to be good even if she hurts me. Not because of that. He just says, when the God's grace and due to the God's grace, this could happen. And one more small thing which I remember from that is he says that he felt it so deeply that it became the natural way to feel. It was not like he tried to act it out. And God can give us these feelings. We can't come up with them ourselves. God can give us these sort of super conscious attitudes that make everything look different. When you are in tune with divine, you look for the hardest jobs, not the easiest job. You look to see what you can give away, not what you can get. This is the secret. Okay, this is, I'm just like thinking of all these points which Swamiji said. Now I'm thinking I've found a secret now, how saints act the way they act. Sometimes when you live in the presence of some all these Kriya Yogis and Ananda Acharyas who have been meditating for a long time, this is their secret, I think, that whatever situation they are ready to give and give. How do they do that? Not because they plan that each and every morning, okay, I have to give, not morely just that, because they get this God's grace and joy. They also want to help, but at the same time, this is coming from inside. It's just not outwardly done. So I think this is also one of the best ways to come out of heartbreaks if you have any. So this is more like the natural way to come out of any heartbreaks you have, because all of us go through in many situations in friendship, relationships, or anything. Whenever you have heartbreaks, at least for the people on the path who already know meditation, now you know how Swamiji came out. And God is there to help you if you just ask Divine Mother, please enlighten me. This is the situation, instead of thinking it out. And she will give you the understanding, that consideration where you can open your heart again. And then you know you're not forgiving that person because you have to forgive, but it's the right thing to forgive, but it becomes natural. Okay, that was what I wanted to share today. And now for a small surprise sort of thing. So last time we were speaking about habits, and I'm also this right attitude of being open minded. So I was like trying to work on this of trying to relax in a sattvic way. It's a tough one for us sometimes. We know how to meditate, we know how to do seva, but in between time, we don't know what to do sometimes. So at this point of time, yeah, we were thinking like what to do. And because of help of Amit, Sonal, and few friends and Jamal, everybody, and So what happened? I got into a new habit now. So I'm going to be, let's all for a few minutes sing this song now. So the song words are, give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. So please repeat along with me. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. 1 second. A few more times we'll sing. Sorry. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Give me a light to light my way. Truth is the light, so wise men say. Okay, thank you, friends. Okay, now I'll hand it over to Jamalji.
Thanks, Premdas. That was so much fun. And that's really what the spiritual path is all about, is just having fun. And that's actually one of Swamiji's children's songs. And it's very uplifting, it's very simple, and it's just joyful. There's a quote in the autobiography of a yogi that is, a sad saint is a sad saint indeed, meaning that a saint who's not joyful is no good. He's a no good saint. And we want to become saints. We want to become good saints. And that means that we have to be joyful. We have to look for fun little simple ways like that little song there to keep up our joy levels and to stay in tune also. That, as Premdas was saying, that we could, for fun, watch movies like Terminator or something where there's people just killing each other left and right. But at the end, we don't feel so right afterwards and we lose our attunement. And it's very important for us to stay in tune with the masters all the time. In the beginning, we're not quite sure what that even means, to stay in tune. And we're not sure if our radio set is quite tuned to the right frequency to be able to listen to the guidance of the masters who are not in a physical form. But over time, we begin to hear this inner voice, our conscience, if you want to call it that, and everyone has a conscience. We begin to learn to listen to it. We begin to learn to trust it. And it takes time for us to learn that. But in time, it is really the right thing. It goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, that God wants for us to be happy. God wants for us to have an absolutely beautiful life. And so we, in order to have that beautiful life, it's not like God's there saying, if you don't tune into me, well, then you're just going to suffer. You choose. It's not like that. It's that God is joy itself. And so the more we tune into that, the more we automatically have joy. At the end of all of it, it's God's grace that gives us liberation. It's God's grace that helps us make spiritual progress. And we're just trying to learn to understand that grace. We're trying to learn to tune into that grace as much as we can. I love Swamiji's words. In fact, he has a book. I can't make this promise because I don't know that it's true, but I hope that this book is now available in India on Amazon, on Kindle. They just released 100 books, so for me to have that straight in my head as to which ones got released and which didn't, you can forgive me. But Swamiji wrote a book called Cooperating with Grace. And those three words, cooperating with grace, it's so beautiful just to think about exactly what do those three words mean and how do we cooperate. And step number one is for us to learn how to cooperate with our brothers and sisters. Earlier today, I was listening to a talk of Swamiji, And he was talking about the importance of giving love and respect to our immediate family members. That, yeah, it's easy to respect some guy out there on the internet who you don't actually ever really come into contact with, and you only watch him once a week or something, and he seems all perfect. But the people in your family who are right there and sometimes doing things that aggravate you, it's much more difficult to love them. But that's where we then need to give even more love, need to become even more centered, need to learn how to feel and control our energy so that it's always uplifted, so that we can give, to have an attitude of compassion, of forgiveness, of understanding that if people are trying to hurt us, it's because they themselves are hurting. And why should we just add fire onto that universal hurt that's floating around the planet? Why not try to neutralize that hurt and be a peacemaker and to give more peace and love and joy in this world? And when we have those kind of attitudes, and again, next week we'll talk specifically about these attitudes, but just in general, when we have those uplifted kind of attitudes, in the end, it's we ourselves who benefit. It's strange, but there's something called, what's the word? Enlightened selfishness. These are words out of Swamiji's time tunnel. And the average man is just selfish, there's no enlightenment in it whatsoever. That he's just thinking, what can I get for myself? But as we start to grow spiritually, we start to understand that, well, if we give, then automatically we get. And that if we want love, that we should give love. And still there's that little bit of element of selfishness in it, but it's okay, because even if we want samadhi for ourselves, and every desire ultimately has to be fulfilled, even if we want samadhi for ourselves, it's not wrong at this point of our spiritual evolution to want good things for ourselves. In time, we ultimately learn how to completely overcome the ego and just be floating in God's bliss all the time and part of that infinite sea of consciousness. But there's a journey to that stage, and part of that journey is first having a refined ego that is full of love, full of goodness, full of right attitude. Speaking of samadhi, you know this story, but it's worth repeating, that the first thing after Sri Yukteswar tapped Master on the chest and gave him samadhi, and Master's floating around out there in the universal cosmos and then writes it down for us later, thank God, so we can know what it's like. What's the first thing Sri Yukteswar does after that? He hands him a broom. Get to work. You have a lot of work in this incarnation. Don't get over drunk with ecstasy. That was all about right attitude. Don't gain this attitude, well, now I have samadhi, that I'm too good for this world. And sometimes I like to try to trick the system, and I just grab that broom, think maybe if I sweep enough Sri Yukteswar, will take a little mercy on me and do it backwards and then give me the samadhi. I don't know how that plan's going to work out, but I don't know. Anyway, I'll keep trying it. I'll let you know how it goes. But whatever it is, that we have to make sure, for me, joy, it's the indicator. It is my barometer out there. The barometer, I guess, measures pressure as to whether it's going to rain or not. And so this is my inner barometer of joy, and how's my inner weather. And I don't need any dark storm clouds on the inside, or any moods or raininess on the inside. That I need it just to be cheerful and sunny on the inside. And I've come to a point where this is my own decision, that, and it's tough. I mean, in the beginning, it's easy to blame others, but now it's my own decision, but it's still difficult because there's these powerhouses of past bad karma that come and just clearly make it look like it's the world's fault. But again, I realize that, well, I'm the one who created this karma. And with God's grace, that this karma can be overcome, that all karma is finite, and that it came and at some point it has to go. And we learn how to manipulate these little rules with Kriya so that it can go quickly and that we can just be swimming in joy all the time. So that's all of our destiny. I'm really happy to be here with all of you walking this path together with fellow Guru Bhais. We're coming to the point for announcements here, but before we do that, let's just close by sending just oh, I don't want to step on the feet here of the healing prayers that are coming up, but let's just center ourselves and let's just surround this world with light. Let's just feel centered for a moment. Good. And now feel centered all the time. And now rub your hands together and let's just chant Om 3 times, just visualizing and sending out light to the entire planet. Please chant with me. Oh.